Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode 1824. This is FDH managing partner Rick Morris coming at you with one of our favorite FDH Lounge dignitaries, my good friend Jake Digman, who is an impresario on all things MMA, pro wrestling. Anytime anything is verging into the squared circle, we always want to catch up with him. It's time for WrestleMania 41, the crowning part of the year for all fans sports entertainment. And again, we get to see this weekend in Las Vegas how everything plays out, or actually Paradise, Nevada. It's of course, the unincorporated part of Clark County, as I go Cliff Clavin on everybody with that little piece of information. But Jake, always a pleasure to have you on, my man. How you doing today, buddy?
It's great to be back in the FDH Lounge, and I'm looking forward to talking some of the grapples with you.
Yeah, it's always great when you and I are able to do that. And in taking a look at the card, just a big picture, I know that from what I texted you, you were kind of coming down in the same place as where I was on this as far as the build of the show, what they had put together. I would say more or less basically the depth of the card, which would be my biggest concern here. And again, as we've established previously, my flavor these days is far, far more on the AEW side. Yours is more on the Fed side. So one would kind of expect me to be looking at this with a little bit of a jaundiced eye, but I don't think I really was a year ago. I think a year ago, I was much more impressed with what the card was. This year, I'm actually kind of surprised because I'm not going to quite say that it quite feels like a Vince era card, but it feels more like a Vince era card, I think, than what we would expect from Triple H, where it has been an improvement in the era since Vince.
The build to this has been very weird. There's only the word I can use to think of to describe it, as it has veered from what they have. And it's the Triple H has been a purveyor of very well done long-term storytelling. One event leading into another, and I just feel that this one is this card. Not saying it's going to be bad, but I'm just saying it from an entertainment standpoint. It just feels like WrestleMania has always been like, the culmination of the story, and this just kind of feels like it's just a bunch of stuff thrown together in a very interesting, like in a not interesting, but in a almost haphazard way, I would say. It just kind of like they're taking names out of a hat going, okay, we got to put this here, regardless of what the actual build for the whole year has been. But we'll see what happens coming out of it. But it's definitely an interesting twist. I said to you in a text off air, the build to this reminds me very much of the AEW pay-per-views where they just, I don't know if they still do this, but for the longest period of time, it was just, we have to get everybody possible that we can onto the show. So it's going to be a 7-man ladder match and 4 tag team scramble and all this other stuff. And that's kind of how certain elements of this feels to me.
Well, I will say, if we're going to go apples to apples here, you would look at probably all in the last 2 years and maybe all out the first couple of years of AEW, that has basically been their WrestleMania. And I think certainly the last 2 years with All In being stadium shows, they built to a host of big matches. And I think that was, well, whatever criticisms there might be for the rest of the year, I think on the biggest night of the year, I think they've come through with build and with depth in terms of, because I've always said this, and I think this was before Double or Nothing last year when I had Alex Marvez on the show. And I said to him, and I think I've said this to you before, that one of the ways that I assess a show is the number of matches that are plausible semi-main events. And WrestleMania in the past has had, the very best ones have had 5 or 6 matches that you could have plausibly called a semi-main event. And this is a thinner one than I think I've seen in quite some time in that regard. Another thing is, and I'll probably mention this a little bit along the way as we're going, there are a couple points here where, and again, you're following this week to week. I'm more following the big picture of what's happening with the promotion, but I know what the stories are by and large. It feels like, to your point, it's not merely a matter of like, okay, these guys are at sort of a similar place on the card. These guys are both sort of borderline upper mid-carders. Let's put them together. Let's make a program. But it feels like in terms of story beats, you talked before, and that's a great point, WrestleMania being the culmination of many stories. there's a lot of things on this card that I'm looking at, and it's like, this looks like the intermediate point of some of these stories that they're telling. And that to me is kind of unusual. I wonder if they're treating this year a little bit different. I guess I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. With this being John Cena's last year, and they're going to try and bill many events along the way as being a little bit bigger, particularly in December, his last match, where that December pay-per-view is generally a throwaway, if they even have one, which they haven't the last couple of years. I wonder if Triple H isn't consciously holding back on some of the matches he might have otherwise put here. This is me giving him the benefit of the doubt.
I mean, that might be the case of the, as far as the overall story of the Cena retirement. But as far as like everything, like the other elements to this, it's like, I don't know. I just like there was, it just like a lot of the build is like out of nowhere. I mean, not to say that it has necessarily been bad. It's just a whole out of nowhere feeling to a lot of it. Like I'm just going to go with the women's triple threat. That just like, there was a buzz for a Bianca Belair and a Rhea Ripley because it's something that has never happened. But by doing this, they're giving you that match, but they're not giving you that match. So they can still put it on hold because they add Io in there where she can do. I think Io Sky is very entertaining and for what she does, for her particular style. But my style of wrestling, and it's interesting, Rick, as I've gotten older, I like a good hoss fight. That is what I'm into. And the older I've become, the more and more like you're gonna laugh at this. I went back and watched a match that I had never seen, and I absolutely loved it. And all of the experts would say, "Dud. 0 stars, terrible." King Kong Bundy versus Uncle Elmer.
Okay.
It was one move and it was an elbow drop, and that was it. They weren't working together to do coordinated spots or all this stuff, and it felt like two big guys going at it in a fight. That's what I like. Not to get on too far onto a soapbox, but like that's how I like my wrestling. I like it to be a simulated fight, not a simulated dance competition where you can tell they're so like the modern style of what we have. Everyone just works for that false finish. Everybody, AEW, WWE, they all do it. It's work for the false finish. They're working to get the crowd to chant, "This is awesome." And if I never heard the crowd chant, "This is awesome" again, I'd be fine with it.
Yeah.
Because it just feels like it's a trope now. And you can tell they're doing it. And there are just certain things that happen in matches all across that they've made too much of an effort for everything to try to be a quote unquote 5-star classic, that if everything is a 5-star classic, okay, AEW, it's why I stopped watching it. Like, I don't watch it at all because all they want to do is do these 5-star classics to impress a certain man from California who's a friend of yours, that if everything's a 5-star classic, then none of it is. It just becomes lost in the shuffle. Just Steve Austin versus Bret Hart stands out because there was nothing else like it that holds up to this day. If every match was like that on the show, then it wouldn't mean anything to me.
Okay. Well, these are interesting
like
points.
You need
although
some that are. No, you go ahead. I knew this was going to trigger something.
Oh, well, I was going to say, if we're talking about now not liking smart mark commentary from the crowd, may I say, I remember a certain young man back around 2017 in Warren, Ohio, chanting, "You deserve it," at Elias as he was getting ready for his call up from NXT. So there is that.
Yeah, that was really fun. That was really fun. Yes, he deserved it. He deserved it. Yeah, that was a good time. But it's just one of those things. Now, I don't know. I just think it's like, different strokes for different folks kind of thing out there. And I think hopefully there'll be a little bit of a blend on that of the different styles and everything of what we're going to see. And I can't wait till we talk about, speaking of styles, can't wait to talk about AJ Styles. You talk about a build of where'd that come from? Why is this happening? Like, if you would have said to, like, if you don't follow the Fed, weekly, you still have that fantasy book of like in your mind, okay, I could see this is where they're going for these big matches, and not a single one that I thought of is actually happening, which I think is kind of wild. Like 8. Yeah, but
well, I will.
I'm sure we'll get into all that.
Oh yeah, and I guess the last point I make, because I want to play off of what you just said there, that if everything is supposed to be at this level, then nothing is. I would say about that, it's WWE with the young guys. because I keep hearing, because they haven't really cycled too many of them up into the main event yet. But you've got, I mean, Braun Breaker clearly looks like he's going to be on his way, as well as Jacob Fatu. Not that he's necessarily super young, but he's new to the Fed. But when you're talking about like Carmelo and some of the guys down at NXT like Oba Femi, and I keep hearing, from Meltzer and some of these other guys, oh, this guy's the future, this guy's the future, this guy's the future. It's kind of like what they say about in the NFL. If you have two quarterbacks, it means you don't have one. So I think part of it is,
you're right,
they're still, I think, working their way through, because at a certain point in time, one of the things that AEW learned to do after that first year, because in the first year, I wasn't as familiar with a lot of these guys from the indies and everything else like that. And I'm sitting there, I'm trying to discern a pecking order. And it wasn't necessarily easy to do, but then it kicked in sometime in 2020, and it's been pretty clear ever since. The pecking order, particularly with the young guys, because I think one of the themes we're going to have is that the main event scene needs a freshening up. You have all of these guys who theoretically can come in and do that, but I think they're still sorting out in their own minds, beyond Braun and beyond Fatu, who's the next guy who's ready to get moved right up into that by maybe next year.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's the problem that they've had for a very long time, in of that they need to make younger stars that are viable stars. I would say the one they have made the most of, is the biggest one to come out, is Rhea Ripley. She has that crossover appeal. She has a chance to, break barriers. The fact that she's a woman, but could very easily be, with the way they push women now almost on an equal footing as men in the WWE, that she has that ability and that look. She has a special, like, there's just something special, but she's real about her. She's one of the only ones that really first pops out in my mind as, to be the next level of a John Cena, I guess you could say, of like that crossover mainstream appeal.
Very possibly. I do find it funny, though, that you would look at her in the one sense, as far as her being a great worker and everything else like that, and look at her as one of the poster children for, post-evolution, legitimate women's wrestler. And yet to get to the level she got to, let's face it, they basically went Attitude Era and leaned into making her, goth mama, all tarted up and everything like that. Basically, I'm not doing a good job of describing it, but they leaned so far into the goth sex appeal of it. So it is kind of funny that it's like they'll go to the old toolbox whenever they need to on that, because basically that's what it was. They had her, basically, it was the revised look and the attitude that came with that pushed her to the moon, not the great work rate that she already had.
But it's going to be the look that pushes you to the moon. You could maybe have a great work rate and get 5 stars all day long, but if you don't have that, okay, Ricochet, who I understand is doing probably the best work of his career right now in AEW, finally as a heel. I'll give credit where credit is due, but he was bland. I don't care how many flips and moves you can do. That's the problem. It's a lot of things. It's like, I forget who was listening. It was one of the wrestling insiders said the least important, like, anybody can do moves. Mm-hmm. It's how you do the moves and why you do the moves and in what way in the story, of how they're done, I guess. And going back to him, and it's a prime example of one that would be with Ricochet. There was just no personality that ever came out, and it was just never going to until they finally let him be, something. They took that snotty little arrogant guy on the internet and finally, let him loose and good. I like it when guys do that and they get a chance to show out when they, leave a certain place and then become a better version of, and it goes, vice versa on that one. Lexus King. Mm-hmm. Is 10 times better than Brian Pillman Jr. ever was in AEW. The way they use him there, in my opinion. Ricochet is being used, and Swerve Strickland are great examples of in AEW now, as opposed to how WWE use them. It's just interesting how one person, the creative mind of one can see something in somebody that another person's creative doesn't.
That's true.
And especially now where we're at, having, so many years of the Vince McMahon administration. Now we're in the full-blown Triple H, Nick Khan era, what they view as, star power and,
That's true. Yeah. No, that's a very good point. And but again, this still looks like a card that looks like something Vince could have put together maybe 4 years or so ago. We'll have to see how it goes. I'm going to take the order of matches off of Wikipedia. I'm dubious that this is how it's going to go. First of all, I would think that they would probably lead with a better, hotter match than this one. But according to Wikipedia, the leadoff match Saturday night is for the World Tag Team Championship, which right then and there, I mean, that kind of is like, why do you have two tag team belts again? I realize you have two shows, but it's a further example of the Fed with the belt inflation.
You don't have two women's tag team titles. True. That's my argument to that.
Oh, that's a great point. You don't have to. Yeah. And we'd be so much better off if they didn't. This is the War Raiders. They are the champions right now. Eric and Ivar versus the New Day, Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods. And this feels like something. This feels like a culmination of this New Day turn that's been going on for months and months, where they kind of shockingly turned on Big E the way that they did there. And it feels like this is going to be something to kind of build their heat up. They are clearly aspiring to get to the Don Callis level of heat, and it looks like they're getting there. But I am predicting that, again, I think it'll be a good, not great match. I think it'll give the outcome that furthers the story beat. But I don't. Why was it them against the War Raiders at WrestleMania? It seems like they could have built probably a more logical type thing. Maybe if some folks that were known to be friends of Big E, potentially in a tag team title match, where could have been that somebody trying to really avenge Big E. But it is what it is on this one. I'm sure this will be a decent enough match. 3 stars in advance.
This is another prime example of kind of all over the place directionless storytelling, because when this incident first happened, when they first turned heel, a team that had been beloved baby faces by that audience for a very long time, for what 10 years, I think it was, something like that, that they were out there. And they had that thing with Big E, and then that led into the program with Rey Mysterio as a locker room leader, and it felt like, okay, maybe we're going to go in something like that with them stepping up. Even if they would have done Kofi versus Rey, or something to that effect. The whole end game was to put the tag team titles, put in the tag team title match. But it just seems like, they did the thing with Big E, and then he was just never mentioned again. And it's not like he doesn't work there. He works there. They act like, it's like, I just don't like when stuff just all of a sudden just gets dropped and we just don't talk about it ever again. I'm looking at you, Dwayne, stuff, it just comes in for half a second and then it's just never brought up again. And this is a prime example of that was this, they're booing him because it's like, almost as an audience member, you've forgotten why you hate the New Day. Like if you didn't see that, they don't remind you of it. Now I'm going to go on a limb and say I'm going to go with the opposite of this one and say that Big E does get involved and helps the War Raiders win as some sort of payoff to what happened there. And then the New Day gets the win late. They win the tag team titles on Backlash or wherever when he's not involved. But then they get that feel good moment where Big E gets a bit of revenge by costing them the tag titles at WrestleMania. It's the only real thing I can think of as or we could just cheat to win and we just act like we just keep moving forward.
Yeah. I could see it going either way, I guess, after hearing what you had to say. If you're relying
to me, Rick, this is just the kind of match that I would just fast forward over on Raw.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things where if you're relying on your storyline continuity for Kill Tony coming on and doing a mini roast on Monday Night Raw and cracking wise about Big E's neck, if that's what you're counting on for your storyline continuity and reminding the audience, then it's kind of a sad state of affairs.
Not even to that level, but having the New Day just mentioned that, they cut their dead weight. They don't need the fans, There's things that were holding it. Make any reference to it possible, but they just haven't done that, and it's just kind of left hanging out in space. Essentially, it's just out there. I don't know. It's just I feel like stuff is left on the table there. I mean, there must be a reason why.
Yeah, and who knows what it is. The next match is a perfect example of what I was talking about before, about something being sort of mid-story. Chad Gable, very new to this El Grande Americano persona. He's in there with Rey Mysterio. This is a thing where, again, Rey at this stage of his career, much like somebody that we'll mention later on in the card here, maybe more than one person potentially. I mean, he seems to be at the stage where he's just sort of putting over other guys here. So I'm guessing that it's going to be Americano here, unless they end up having a surprise return, because they seem to be building towards potentially him facing. I'm trying to think of the name of him coming back in. The guy where when we saw him in War and Tommy End, and you were like, I've never seen Tommy End before. I'm trying to Black, Alistair Black. Yeah.
Alistair Malachi Black.
Alistair Malachi. That's why I couldn't think of it. Yeah.
I mean, former leader of the House of Black Guys.
Yes. So they House of Black Guys. So they've been. I'd seen some online speculation that they're going to build towards him, taking on Gable at some point here. So maybe it becomes a run-in situation, maybe somewhat akin to Hacksaw Jim Duggan at WrestleMania 3. Who knows? But I mean, I don't know. This is one where I'm guessing that Gable / Americano goes over to further his growth. But this is still relatively early / mid in his whole storyline development, and he didn't get into this character with Rey Mysterio as an end game. The end game is going to be somebody else, and that somebody else isn't wrestling him at WrestleMania. That's kind of an example of one of my points there, I think.
Yeah, this is one of those ones that feels very Vince to me. I don't know. However, my buddy said to me, he goes, well, how is it that El Grande Americano gets to have a singles match on WrestleMania, but Chad Gable doesn't? And without missing a beat, I just responded back with, because El Grande Americano is better than Chad Gable. Duh.
Well, yeah. You know who both of them are a lot better than? Shorty G. Both of them blow that guy away. So that is yeah. Yeah, the darkest days of the
that's one of those ones that's been that's terrible. You're short.
Yeah.
That's your gimmick, pal. You're short.
Yeah.
Dress like a terror. What is with Vince McMahon wanting, like, the later run, wanting to dress so many people as basketball players? I don't get that.
I don't know.
I don't understand that. What is that?
And again, whatever happened to Vince having amnesia about the fact that theoretically most of your characters are supposed to be out there to try to draw money? I mean, it just, as opposed to, again, his own amusement and his own fart jokes and everything like that. So, this match will be fine for what it is. But like you said, kind of a throwaway Monday Night Raw match. I think we're going to say that about a lot of matches on the card.
Night one on the main event, to me, every single match on this card, I'm pretty sure for night one, is a throwaway main event, is a throwaway Monday Night Raw match. This night one to me feels like an episode of Raw.
Yeah, it very well could be. The next match, I don't think it's going to be great work rate wise with Mrs. Brandon Phillips in there versus Naomi. Now, Naomi's a great worker, and she's going to get the most out of Ms. Cargill that anybody possibly can. This at least has a story behind it, but I was told that when Jade Cargill came into the Fed, oh yeah, her work rate's going to improve a lot, and she's going to be under our banner now, and oh boy, she won't be the clumsy musclehead she was in AEW. Well, funny how that turned out. So this is an attempt to at least give her a story that she can sink her teeth into. I think she's miscast as a face. I think that will continue to manifest itself over time. But again, this match will be as good as Naomi can basically drag it to be, I would say.
I absolutely agree with everything you just said there. I mean, they can only use smoke and mirrors so much to do what they can to protect Jade Cargill. They've had her in tag match. They bought her on the look and not so much on once the execution started happening, and they were like, oh, okay, she's not very good. And this one could be, to borrow the old phrase, bowling shoe ugly. Naomi has has to have her working boots on to make this one work here. And I dig. It's Jade. It reminds me as a lot like the Ultimate Warrior, in of that everything's great. Her entrance is awesome. She's got the look, and then the bell ring.
Yeah. Well,
And
it
it's like,
just
okay, well, can she make it through? She's better than the Warrior was, but due to use that
yeah.
analogy there. The thing I find most interesting about this is the trivia question that this match is the answer to a trivia question that nobody asked. This is the first ever one-on-one women's match without a title or a stipulation in WrestleMania history.
Wow. Okay.
It's
yeah,
the
because
first time ever in history.
back in the day, it would have been, puppies on a pole match or something like that. So, yeah, man, that is.
And the how far back you have to go to get to just a one-on-one women's match at WrestleMania that was just not for a championship. It
Yeah.
was Tori Wilson and I believe Dawn Marie or not Dawn Marie or Candice Michelle in like a pillow
Okay.
fight match or something at like WrestleMania 22 or 23. That's kind of wild. But yeah, first ever one-on-one regular match between two women, not for a championship and no stipulation in WrestleMania history.
Well, and at the risk of being a tribalist troll, I will mention that it has been pointed out a lot on the old interwebs recently here that as far as the black guys in the Fed, they're having a hard time making the big shows here. They're having a hard time getting a foothold on some of the bigger shows here. So it is nice to see that whatever predispositions they might have, that's a nice way of putting it. It doesn't apply to the women. At the very least, they don't have that kind of mental block when it comes to the women. Two black women wrestling in this match here. I will say also, too, the arrogance of the Fed leadership here. Oh, we're just going to train Jade Cargill a lot better and that'll solve everything. Do they not know that it was Bryan Danielson that was training her in AEW? I mean, like if Bryan Danielson has trained you for a year and you're still basic at best, and basic is incredibly kind, then you are what you are. But, they're going to,
send her to Rip Rogers.
yeah. Rip Rogers. Cue joke about fishing something out of a toilet right now. I think that was in the, was that not in the sleaze thread? I think it was.
Maybe.
I think it was, yes. So yeah, the toilet is rather apropos, I think, of what the work rate will be in that match. I don't think we'll say the same about
5
the next
stars.
match. Negative 5 stars.
5 stars. 6 if it was in the Tokyo Dome.
Tokyo Dome. Negative 5 stars. Trademark past lounge guest Brian Alvarez. The next match will be a really good one.
He has been great, by the way. Just Brian Alvarez has amused me. He has been great, by the way.
Yes.
I thoroughly enjoy when I catch him calling out Dave Meltzer and then bickering like an old married couple. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, Alvarez.
Throw that out there.
Alvarez is amusing, no question about it. LA Knight defending the United States Championship against Jacob Fatu. This is a Jacob Fatu elevation match, clearly. Again, kind of random as far as putting these two guys together. Why LA Knight had to be the transitional champion. I mean, I'm never averse to seeing him wear gold because I've always thought that's one of the guys that could and should be perhaps higher on the card than he is based on the way that the crowd reacts to him. But this is kind of an example of like where I'm talking about that, like they're doing things where WrestleMania is like mid-story beat for so many of these things here. We thought it would be Jacob Fatu and Solo possibly in a match here. I mean, that's something where they're going to continue a build on that. Are they going to milk this all the way to SummerSlam with those two? Who knows? But you would have thought that would have been the match here. Clearly, they thought the direction was put some gold on Jacob Fatu first. They're going to do that. It'll actually be the second time he's had gold because a year ago, he was one half of the tag team champions before they thought better of it, of like, oh, this team's going to have to do a job at some point, and we don't want him to be part of that. So they retconned that to where it was two of the others in the group that were holding the title. But again, Jacob Fatu is going to be elevated from this. He is one of the guys that's, the part of the next group of main event guys here. There's probably a match with Roman Reigns in the offing somewhere here. So, I mean, I can't complain with the elevation of Jacob Fatu, but it's a random opponent for him. And again, it's putting off the Solo match, which is one where if you're thinking Jacob Fatu has a WrestleMania-worthy match for this year, it would be with him. It would be the culmination and the breakup of the New Bloodline.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a very entertaining match. This is one of the ones I'm looking forward to the most on this card, just because I'm a huge Fatu fan, and LA Knight has long since brought it for years, and I'm glad to see guys in this have this opportunity to be in, under the spotlight like this. I just think this match would have had a much better build had LA Knight not lost the championship in what has seemingly turned out to be a rather pointless Shinsuke Nakamura United States Championship run that went
Yep.
nowhere and did
Yep.
nothing to, I guess, elevated his. It was unnecessary, in my opinion. Had he had been still a champion this entire time, I think it would have added more emphasis and have been a bigger moment when Jacob Fatu to defeat him. Now, obviously, the logic in my brain says Jacob Fatu goes over, but I can also see the WWE booking of Solo costing Jacob Fatu the match at WrestleMania to further that story. Wouldn't agree with that booking, but I could see them doing that booking.
Yeah.
Because they did just put the belt back on LA Knight. So, to your point, then he's just a transitional champion. Had they never done the Nakamura thing, then it would have had a lot more. He had a stronger position going into this.
Well, here's my counterpoint to that. If they really cared that much about not making LA Knight a transitional champion here, they never would have given Shinsuke the pointless title reign in the first place. So I don't think they're really too concerned about LA Knight. I think it's one of those, ironically, I think they're looking at him like they looked at Shinsuke, of where he was bulletproof to a certain floor, I guess you would say. Now, Nakamura is a guy in 2017 when we saw him in Warren sort of at the tail end of that run there. I was kind of pessimistic, like, Vince is just going to make him a sushi chef or something like that he can understand in his simple mind. And they didn't exactly do that, but it was a thing where after a year or so of having him high up on the card, they kind of decided he is what he is, and based on his charisma, he'll never get past a certain floor. And I think they've been content to use him that way since, which I had considered to be a waste at the time. But I mean, I'm long since past the point, because I think basically they beat the value out of him. They're probably on the way to doing the same thing with LA Knight, of like, well, he'll always be over to a certain degree. The crowd is into him. The crowd's going to finish his catchphrases. So I don't think they're too worried about him.
LA Knight unfortunately got too hot at the wrong time, and they had to finish that Cody Rhodes story.
Yes.
So his popularity came right in the midst of that, and when he didn't win the championship, it killed him. It just, the people who were, because they wanted him to get that opportunity. There's a lot of times where the fans want their guy to get the championship match or get that opportunity because they feel like he's being slighted, and he's being slighted when he gets it and he doesn't win. It's like, well, he got it, and it happens. I mean, there's over the years we could give unlimited number. Rusev is the first one that pops in my mind when they had the main event. He had a main event of pay-per-view for the world title because of all the whole Rusev Day thing. And that was it. There you go. You got your moment. Get it out of your system. The only one that actually overcame that was Bryan Danielson back in the day. He was the only one, and their hands were forced. They didn't have a choice. They had to do it, or else it would have been mutiny. But everybody else is just kind of had this been 2 years ago and they gave LA Knight the Jey Uso push of this year, it would have been humongous. He'd been a superstar.
Absolutely.
A megastar.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, too, they could have potentially, moved him to Raw and basically put him on top of the card there. They do things outside of the draft season, quote unquote, all the time. So it wasn't like you necessarily had to feed him to Roman. You could have taken him out of Roman's path and put him on top of Raw and elevated him there. But, hindsight's 20/20 on that one. The next match here, I will say, I'm saying night one, there's only one semi-main event. Some people might be tempted to put this match as that one. I am not. This match is not a semi-main event in my book. No matter how much they've tried to get us to buy into it with all these extra shenanigans and everything like that, however much you believe of it or don't. Tiffany Stratton defending the women's championship against Charlotte Flair. And it's one of those things where, again, Charlotte Flair getting the kind of go-away heat on coming back. I think somehow or another they were delusional enough to think that Charlotte is like the one person I think that's immune to the welcome back pop. Everybody gets the welcome back pop in the world, but the person who's been shoved down our throats more than most is not going to be the one that gets that. So they've tried to do the whole thing here, worked shoot stuff here that allegedly blurred into a shoot with some of the promo comments. I'm half expecting Scott Hudson to be a guest commentator for the match so he can channel the year 2000 and say, what are they supposed to do now? Improvise? But this is a match where it just, I mean, it's capable based on the ability of both of them to put together good matches, both based on the athleticism of both. It could be a good match. I mean, if this match fetched as high as, say, 3.75 stars, I wouldn't be sitting here having a heart attack in surprise. But it also could blend into a horrible styles clash. And again, if any of the unprofessionalism between the two that they have exhibited, allegedly with some of the shoot comments, comes up. Again, you talk a bowling shoe ugly. This one has the lowest floor on the card, because if these two get unprofessional and Shiznit gets real, in a sense, it'll be more entertaining than most other things Saturday night. But in another sense, too, as a pro wrestling match, it will completely fall apart.
I don't think they're gonna that it's gonna devolve into a shoot, but that is the that is also one of the build of the intrigue of a build where you're like, oh yeah, will they go shoot on each other? I don't see that happening. I just don't see what the big deal is about Tiffany Stratton. I got the whole it's Tiffy time, but I mean every time she hits that her version of the BME, the PME, I think that's what they call it, the prettiest moonsault ever.
Yeah.
I'm just like cringing that she's going to hit her head.
Right.
Like every single time I see her do it, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I commend them for wanting to build a star out of this, somebody new coming out of it. But like, it just, I don't know. This just feels like almost like forced in a way. It just, for the amount of people that could actually put on a WrestleMania caliber women's match. You remember a couple years ago, Charlotte Flair and Rhea Ripley tore the house down because they were pissed off that they didn't get the main event. And no one could follow them. And it was one of the best women's matches ever in wrestling history.
Right.
It was amazing. Charlotte was capable of doing that. I just don't see that same level of intensity in an opponent like a Tiffany. This is going to be 100% Charlotte Flair carrying this to whatever it's going to be. It's on her because, Tiffany just doesn't have the reps in yet. And I don't know. I just find it, interesting that they went ahead and pulled the trigger. I mean, they had to on, because they gave her the Money in the Bank, so they had to pull the trigger. If you're going to do Charlotte Flair is, say what you want about her, she is a recognizable star, even though she doesn't look anything like Charlotte Flair anymore. She is a recognizable, like, big name, big money star. Tiffany is they're trying to get her to that. It just remains to be seen. Like, they even said this in the build. She comes across as like 2015 Charlotte Flair from NXT in a lot of ways. And she's a tall blonde that's athletic. That was Charlotte Flair's gimmick. It's a case of, it's like, you're similar. I get old guard new, what they're trying to do with this, where Tiffany suddenly said in a promo, like, she has absolutely nothing to lose, and Charlotte Flair has everything. If she loses, she just loses to Charlotte Flair, the greatest of all time in women's wrestling. And that's her words, not mine. And if Charlotte Flair's okay, then why? But Charlotte Flair has everything to lose because then she just loses to a 25-year-old kid or whatever. I'm like, well, then no one wins. You've basically said that no matter whoever wins, everybody loses.
Well, Jake, let me postulate based on what you said here. When you're saying that, part of the build supposedly is, looking into not necessarily a mirror, but something like a mirror of your younger self. This is essentially Cactus Jack versus Terry Funk if those two were a couple of heavily made up blonde female wrestlers.
I never thought this match would be compared to Cactus Jack and Terry Funk. But my God, if Tiffy time comes out with a barbed wire baseball bat and, Charlotte starts swinging a ladder around her head, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things, too, where you talk about Charlotte having to carry the match. This is A, rusty Charlotte Flair, and B, when you talk about Charlotte doesn't look as much like she used to, you're, of course, referring to, as most people are, facially. but really sort of beyond that. It's one of those things where, you could laud her for, oh, okay, washboard abs now or whatever. But there's also a certain amount of padding that the body needs to have. And hopefully it's not too piggish of me to say that Tiffany, certainly still has that. Charlotte doesn't look as much like herself in that way either. She's gone in the direction of trying to be super lean and everything like that. So that was not the body that Charlotte Flair had when she was capable of carrying other wrestlers in matches. So that's a very big question mark if we're expecting her to carry this match. Maybe she still can, instincts alone. It's like riding a bicycle, maybe. But then again, maybe not.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You actually hit the nail on the head with that one because there's a lot of X factors and a lot of things that have changed there. And this could be a hard hitting, stiff battle, or this could be bowling shoe ugly. And I think it could go either way really quick, possibly at the same time.
Yeah, and it's normally a match like that where it might be like a real train wreck and might go off the rails. I might generally be excited to see it, like, oh, this will at least be a spectacle. But I'm still yawning at the thought of it, though, Jake. That's kind of sad.
It's just, to me, I'm just not. It just feels paint by numbers. It's like, here we go. Charlotte Flair's back. She's in a championship match. It's like, we've done this. She's been in the championship match every single year, unless she was hurt, every single year.
Yeah.
And my prediction, Charlotte Flair is going to win because Charlotte Flair has to get to what number is she at now? 14, 13, 14. She's got to get to 15. She's going to get to 17 because she's the one that's going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. To surpass not her father at that point, but John Cena, as we'll get to later in the thing here. Spoiler alert. But now to the match that I would call the legitimate semi-main for the night. But it's also, I would say, damning with faint praise. Because, again, we would burst into gales of laughter if we compared the World Heavyweight Championship to the undisputed WWE Championship. But theoretically, top world title on both brands, supposed to be co-equal. We know it's anything but. Gunther defending against Jey Uso. And this is one of these ones where, again, so Jey Uso gets that push up the card here. And, again, it'll be very interesting to see if it's a cautionary tale like last year, where we'll talk about Damian Priest subsequently. He's wrestling in the second night on a thrown together match. Where's Jey Uso going to be a year from now? I mean, I think it's kind of a cynical thing, the way that they've built around him, because, I mean, he's a merch monster and he gets the chance going like nobody else these days. But does everybody forget what dog crap that match was that he had with his brother last year at WrestleMania, and that he's never really been somebody that's, really wowed the crowd with, not to use the dreaded IWC term of work rate, but I mean, you got to have a certain baseline of it anyways. And I will just say too, I mean, the Usos were never really my cup of tea as a quote unquote great tag team. So it's one of those things where, again, now I have found, again, Jey Uso has proven me wrong, because when he first started getting the singles matches for the title, and what was it, the fall of 20 or 21, I'm like, wait, what?
2020,
you're going to try and make the Usos distinguishable from one another? I never thought they'd do it, and they've done it. So, but I mean, he's basically playing with, to use the Vegas motif here, right? He's playing with house money at this point. They're clearly going to strap the Rocket to him. All things being equal, Rocket, it's only the Raw World title. Clearly he's going to get it here and he's going to have it. But I mean, where's he going to be a year or two from now? Is he going to be sustainable in that main event mix? I don't know. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. It's one of those things where if they'd have had two world titles around two shows, like when Hacksaw Duggan with Ho, or Road Dogg with, your ass better call somebody, maybe they'd have been a world champion. Jey Uso with Yeet in this era of the split world titles is going to get a world title. So we'll have to see how that plays out. It's going to be a great match, if for no other reason, and Gunther is one part of it, and Gunther's one of the 5 to 10 best on God's green earth today.
So you mentioned, I want to touch on something. You mentioned, guys with catchphrases that were over in the Attitude Era or whatnot. If they would have had a secondary world championship. There was a Monday Night Raw was in Cleveland one night in 1999 in this February. The world championship match, the WWE title was defended by The Rock, was defended against the Road Dogg. And we were at that Raw live, and my uncle said to me, he goes, they should have given, listen to how much the crowd loves the Road Dogg. They should have given him the belt. They're going nuts for him. And I looked at him, I go, I'm so glad you're not a wrestling booker. Like, here's the thing. Me personally, I think there's more value to be made in Gunther retaining the championship. I think, building him up over time as this dominant champion, I think there's so much that can be done with that. However, they want to make the kids happy, and the kids absolutely love Jey Uso. I get it. And they, pushes the merch and everything. If we go with Jey Uso winning, it's going to lead into something else, because I'll tell you this, if he does, we'll go with the story that he is the, he wins.
Mm-hmm.
In my booking scenario, he is a transitional champion. There is not a long reign here.
Right.
And we'll get right. There is absolutely not a long reign. He becomes a transitional champion, possibly as soon as the next PLE. He loses it.
Yeah.
As fast as I'm saying it.
I can just see this. Looking at the night one card, I can, this won't be something on camera. This would be something off camera. But I can see him encountering good old Ray in the back, and Ray giving him a look and saying, "Enjoy it while it lasts. I've been there, kid." So.
And I will get into the story with that as we progress on, of where I think they're going with the Jey Uso will get his moment. His brother will come out and celebrate him. The crowd will yeet. They will go nuts, and it will be a moment in time.
Yeah, basically a WrestleMania moment, which is
that's what they try to do. This is a moment, and to have the entire arena just like they wanted them all to do. Yes, now they're yeeting.
Yeah. So they finally
might even earlier too. Who knows?
They exactly. Yeah, between and yeet, they finally found a replacement for yes after all this period of time. In the main event for the night, as you pointed out to me in a text, very random that this is how CM Punk gets his main event. Roman Reigns, CM Punk, Seth Rollins, triple threat match. It's one of those things where you could see the minute that they started moving towards putting this together, this was going to be the night one main event, because it blows away Gunther and Jey Uso in terms of build, in terms of star power. And I say that without even any disrespect towards Gunther, who has really established himself as a world champion and taken a step up. But these guys have been in main event spots for years. A lot of story that's being told here. The two guys with the ties to Paul Heyman, but all of the speculation that I'm seeing is that this is a red herring, and in the end, that it's the wise man that walks away with Seth Rollins, and Seth Rollins comes out on top in this match, thus giving Roman Reigns and CM Punk something to go after him with. And the hint I've even further seen online, I don't know if they'll go in this direction, but I think like Seth Rollins has made some sort of, friendly tweets towards The Rock and everything like that, that maybe it becomes some kind of an alliance with Heyman and Rollins, potentially with The Rock and John Cena. And that maybe you see some, very, high power, star power tag team matches there. You could easily headline a PLE, potentially even SummerSlam, if it was like Rollins and Cena against Reigns and Punk. So don't be surprised if it goes in that direction.
I could see that. My logic says I just see like Heyman turning on Punk and helping Roman win, and Punk kind of being along the lines of, I kind of knew you were going to do that when I asked you, kind of like the, I knew what I was getting myself into kind of thing. Just coming out of this, I have Roman Reigns winning, because it sounds crazy. I think he needs the win more so than the other two do. And for the story coming out of it, the next night on Raw, and when Jey Uso has his championship celebration, and then when Roman comes out to acknowledge him as the champion, and then Roman, who has been a heel this entire time, despite the fact that the fans have been cheering for him, he's still the same narcissistic leader heel. He turns on Jey Uso and attacks him because he wants that belt. Because at the end of the day, it's all about him being in the position of power. And that's who Jey Uso loses his belt to, is Roman Reigns.
Okay.
And it's the World Heavyweight Championship. So I see that splitter off with Rollins and Punk doing an actual program proper, other than the two matches we've already seen. I know everyone says, like, I've seen all the stuff online about, Rollins going with Punk. I think there's too much stuff online Rollins, Heyman going with Rollins. I think there's too much stuff online about that. And if we've seen stuff in the past, when stuff gets like way out there, they don't do it. And I don't see them doing it. I think that was intentionally put out there to make people think that that's what's going to happen. Heyman has said it out of character that he's not going to work with anybody other than Roman Reigns or CM. I just don't see him being aligned. I just don't, at his age, I just don't see something like that happening. I see somehow the question is, how do you interweave everything together? So the one idea that you can have here is that CM Punk somehow makes it so Roman pins Rollins. So therefore, because Roman has never beaten Rollins ever. So then you can go with it's Punk's fault that Roman finally got his win over Rollins. And then that furthers the anger with Rollins and Punk. And then the Heyman thing almost becomes like, it's a factor, but it's a non-factor. At the end of it, it's going to right itself, and he's going to end up back with Roman Reigns, in my opinion.
Okay. The only thing I would say to that is, I mean, you would then be settling into, if it's Roman as a heel champion on Raw, then it's sort of like, his reign really sort of mimicked, and not in a good way, the Triple H reign of terror of the early 2000s here. So if you're going to do that again, and if you're kind of going to go against the crowd, because it was the crowd that basically, now I know that a lot of it was they were feeding the crowd with the hints of, Roman while he was gone and everything like that. But so it was not completely inorganic or organic, but as far the crowd, I think they think that there's more value in Roman as staying face at this point in time, as opposed to turning heel. That's the only thing, because they've done that. It's not to say that they couldn't go back to the well, and you're going to have Cena as the big heel champion on SmackDown. So that's just my thought there.
So you want to have Roman there because you have Cena in that spot. So I could very easily see them doing similar to a Brock Lesnar Cody Rhodes feud, where he turns heel on Jay, and then Jay beats Roman, and that's when Roman endorses him and was like, okay, and he gives him that, and that would also complete the Bloodline storyline. Because the whole Bloodline story was about Jey Uso and Reigns. So it actually would bring that full circle.
Well, I was told by Paul Heyman that we were only in like the third inning of that whole Bloodline storyline. So, notwithstanding,
I think we're in a rain delay.
Jake, we've been in a rain delay since the Survivor Series, but they make world's longest rain delay. This is longer than the rain delay of Game 7 of the 2016 World Series, for a painful reminder. But
yes, the only time I've ever believed in the HARP conspiracy theory.
Yeah, pretty much. What a sad occasion here.
No one can convince me no one can convince me that President Barack Obama, who is from Chicago, didn't turn on the weather control, or that one isolated spot to control the weather. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Using the weather, the seeded clouds, as it were. Absolutely. All right. So looking at night 2, Easter Sunday, as it were, Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez, the tag champions, versus Bayley and Lyra Valkyria. And basically, it's a makeshift tag team against Liv and Raquel. I don't think they're done with them on top at this point. Liv has grown into being a very good worker over a period of time. Used to be mid as heck, but has grown into being a very good worker. Raquel has always, I think, been at that point. You talk about, we talked about this with Rhea Ripley, the Haas type fighter type thing. Raquel has always been believable to me in that role. And that as I think I saw her note in an interview recently, this is sort of the second time in her career that she has sort of played Diesel to somebody else's Shawn Michaels, and she seems delighted by that. Yeah, she seems delighted because she apparently was a big fan of the Diesel character back in the day. She's very good at it. She's like Diesel if Diesel could work. Okay, so they're going to keep the belts on them. It's against the makeshift tag team. It'll be a pretty good match, but again, if this one opens night 2, that would surprise me, because you mean to tell me you can't do better than this opening night 2? So I'm dubious.
That's not opening night. That's not.
Wikipedia's probably wrong.
Night 2.
Yeah.
Right. I can't see that opening night 2. It's a pointless throwaway match. I feel like Bayley deserves better. You know, if
Yeah.
anything, Bayley should be facing Lyra Valkyria for the Women's Intercontinental Championship to boost that championship,
Yes.
if nothing else. And you know, they could. I know I said earlier where they did bloated matches, but the women's tag team title might be one that calls for a bloated, like fatal 4-way or something kind of thing to do it. So I am actually not opposed to the whole idea of just having 2 sets of tag team championships, one for the men, one for the women. If you don't have a program, just do a fatal 4-way between each team. Both. I actually like that idea. Got people on the card, and it was inoffensive, and there was a build to it, especially the SmackDown tag titles for the men. It feels like a waste of time. For the amount of Liv you've singing her praises and Raquel for the work they've done and improved, they just deserve a better spot, in my opinion, other than just something that's thrown in there. Heck, they would even be in a better position, in my opinion, if they were hosting WrestleMania as opposed to this match. But that's just me.
You know what I'd rather see even than that is you have 2 nights now. So you could do one night the Andre and one night the, what would it be, the Mae Young? But put some real stakes on it. Put a world title match in there and then lard it in with a couple of bigger names like Sheamus and Randy Orton for the men and whatever. You got to seed it with a couple of like legit ones. Liv and Raquel would both be very believable in that role as world title contenders. Also, there would be the whole what if they were the last 2?
Or even a mid-card title, one of the mid-card titles, because the world title already has its build. I don't want to do a world title thing on the actual show, because then it would negate the build to the actual world title.
I mean, a future world title shot.
Oh, I was thinking you were saying, no.
Okay. The stakes.
Yeah, I like that idea.
The stakes are for a future world title match, and
that's where I like that idea.
But they never did it that way with the Andre or with the Mae Young one, because I think they named it after Mae Young after they decided they couldn't name it after Moolah anymore. Whatever they did with it, but anyways,
they just called it the Women's WrestleMania Battle Royal.
Because here was the whole thing. Vince just decided, well, everybody that it's in is mid-carders, so it won't be believable if it's not. But like now, you have enough, again, name wrestlers like, Randy Orton and Sheamus. I keep coming back to that here. By the way, Randy Orton, supposedly they're going to throw together a match with him and Nick Aldis one of these nights here. So Nick Aldis, God bless him, will get his moment in the sun.
Is it going to be Nick Aldis? Because I don't think it's going to be Nick Aldis. I think it's going to be somebody else. But the question I got to put on with that is, I could see them debuting somebody, but as we've noticed with the WWE, when something happens against, and I'm going to use Brock Lesnar's situation as a prime example, into his spot at the Royal Rumble, they didn't change any of the script. The script for this, I'm pretty sure, was, and this is just be free balling, I guess, guessing on this one, that it was going to be Sami Zayn coming back to help Randy Orton defeat Kevin Owens. It was going to look strong and to lead into Backlash in St. Louis, and then on pay-per-view for the last time we would get spoilers here, we would get Randy Orton versus John Cena. However, if the argument with, you have to bring somebody in that would still have to lose to Randy. So I could see it being Aldis in that situation. I think that would be a letdown, because guys like us, we know who the national treasure is, but that audience has no idea that he is a longtime professional wrestler. And and they don't have enough time. They could show, thanks to the TNA relationship, they could show footage of who he was, but then it just looks like Randy Orton's beating up an old guy.
He's beating up Magnus. He wasn't even Nick Aldis when he was there. He was Magnus. Now, I think Magnus might have been world champion at some point, but his peak was as the NWA champion. And they don't have the rights to the NWA stuff. This isn't 1998 anymore.
Any of that stuff. So, So my thought, going into it's like, if you do Randy Orton versus a mystery opponent, but then the mystery opponent would have to deliver on the surprise, and they would have to go over, because if not, they're dead in the water coming into it. Now, a great one for that would be in a perfect spot if you have, and you could get to Randy Orton and John. You could have Randy Orton lose here and still have him face Cena. They could get to that if ultimately that is the plan.
That's like Ryback losing to Mark Henry and then getting the shot at John Cena the next month. I'm
not saying it's good. I'm just saying there's ways to get to it, because let's say this is the spot where they re-debut Aleister Black, right?
Okay.
He'd have to win or he's dead.
Okay.
Same thing. And another one that I think would be really good, like the one I personally would like to see is a returning Rusev in this spot, because I think out
Okay.
of those two, he is the more well established and well known name
Okay.
to the WWE
Okay.
audience, and I would think it'd be, have him come out with it's WrestleMania, so go all the way on this one. Have him come out with the horns blaring. Have the actual people, like the guys blowing the horns, come out there like Miro's AEW entrance was, and do a take, because Miro in AEW was fantastic. The Redeemer,
Yeah.
I loved it. He's one of those guys that was just very poorly used in that company for whatever the reason is. We don't know. I don't know
job,
what it was,
though.
but
he didn't want a job though. That was,
Well, you're not going to I don't think he wants a job there at all now. Apparently,
well,
hey,
true.
you get paid millions of dollars, but that version, because we've under this new administration, they have shown they're willing to let guys come in with their AEW characters. Sean Spears is essentially his AEW character. Cody Rhodes is 100% his AEW character. So a thing where Rusev comes back as a repackaged Rusev, as the Redeemer Rusev, and just goes in there as that version of that character, so that he's something different. You have the horns blow, and then you do the Rusev intro, and I think the crowd would go absolutely crazy for it.
Yeah,
because it's a surprise and somebody new coming back. That's just a thought of what you can do with Randy. That is a pivot from what was going to take place. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be unless I am, but I don't think I'm going to be as spot on this one with the audible that had to be called for the Money in the Bank cash in. But I can see them doing this. Is just an opportunity, I think, for them to debut somebody and make an immediate star, because if you debut somebody and they beat Randy Orton at WrestleMania, that shows hey, the company is behind you.
Well, I will say, too, that per some of the stuff you said before, as far as not liking AEW, not liking the flippy stuff anymore. So clearly you are leaving behind the Jake Digman, who, along with myself, was the fifth Beatle of Sunday Night Submission back in the 2000s here. The new Jake Digman, who likes King Kong Bundy versus Uncle Elmer. So I'm not surprised that you forego the smart mark thing here. You know what all the smart marks are predicting is going to happen, don't you? Don't you know who all the smart marks think? Jeff Cobb debuting here. That's who some people are thinking it's going to be. It won't be, by the way.
Everyone's going to respond back and go, who in the hell is Jeff Cobb? It won't be. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
it won't
who
be.
Is now Tanza Cueto? I would lose everything. I'd mark out super for that one. Oh, that'd be great.
Yes. Can you call him Jeff Cobb but still kind of costume him a certain way? Like, that would be awesome.
It's like, I mean, Jeff Cobb, if Jeff Cobb would be, I hate to say this to him, but he's going to go the NXT route, only because that audience that's their smart mark audience, is not as much as it used to be when it was Black and Gold brand, but it's still, that's the partnership with TNA and the, things you never thought you'd see, people showing up on different champions that very much caters to the smart mark audience. I could see Jeff Cobb debuting somewhere in there, maybe even, how they used to do it at East. I could see Jeff Cobb sitting ringside during Stand and Deliver.
Well, also too,
that's how they used to debut the big, big signees.
Well, NXT 2.0, which you and I all said at one point in time, is actually more like NXT 4.0 when you look at the history of it. But whatever this version of NXT is, it still has an inordinate amount of green guys down there. They're not as big on the indie vet scene as they were, 2020 and before. So a guy who is, Jeff Cobb is an excellent worker. Jeff Cobb is a guy that can get in there and be a stabilizing veteran force in many matches. I agree that's probably where they'll send him. I think that's probably undervaluing his contribution to the company, but I think that's how they'll use him. He's not debuting at WrestleMania against Randy Orton. Sorry, smart marks.
The other problem, too, is name one Jeff Cobb promo.
Yeah,
You need that to survive in WWE.
Yeah.
They're very prominent. I cannot tell you how shocked I was when I saw Penta speak English. I'm like, he can talk.
True. Yeah. Why wasn't he doing this before? Yeah.
Right.
I've seen some of Cobb's New Japan promos. I mean, they're not bad, but he is going to have to step that up. No question about it. When you talk about the kind of indie veterans that once populated the NXT scene, a lot of them were guys like AJ Styles, who was deemed to be big enough when he came in to skip NXT. He went right to the main roster in 2016. And I look at this match with Logan Paul, where he's clearly here to put him over. And I kind of do the dividing lines here on the AJ Styles timeline in the Fed here, because I think 2016 to 2020, I mean, I think you could probably put together a DVD of his best stuff that would be, it might rival the entire time previous combined. It might, turn of the century to when he came into the Fed. You might have as much great stuff in those couple of years as you had in all of his pre-Fed stuff. But the match where he was buried by The Undertaker is almost symbolic, because the last couple of years, like when he hasn't been hurt, he's been in spots where he's just basically there to make other guys look better. And he's at the like, let's use his remaining name value to give a rub to this guy or that guy or whatever. And it's a shame, because he can still go at, maybe not even 90% of what AJ Styles used to be, because 100% of what AJ Styles used to be is probably on a short list of the greatest wrestlers ever. But I see something like this and I'm just sad. Like, he's here to put over, and I'm showing my age, get off my lawn guy, but he's here to put over a YouTube guy. And I understand it's a YouTube guy that works hard and can do great matches. And I'm being worked as far as how obnoxious of a douche I think he is. I realize I'm being worked to some degree, but I mean, this match just makes me sad. This match in a nutshell is why I prefer AEW, because you won't ever see one of the best guys in AEW getting fed to a YouTube guy.
The irony of you calling him a YouTube guy as this video is going to go on YouTube is not lost on me, sir. Just so you,
I'm not wrestling in Vegas this Sunday.
If you got the call, you would.
That's neither here nor there.
My problem with this match is I've watched every single Raw and SmackDown in the build to this. I have no idea why this match is happening, from a storyline perspective and from an actual match perspective. This is a waste of both AJ Styles and a waste of Logan Paul, in my opinion. I think AJ Styles would better assume if you haven't faced a young guy, okay, face someone you're building towards in the future on this one. And part of the appeal on the other side of this with Logan Paul is the promo work back and forth. AJ Styles, he's a lot of great things about him, but no one will say he's one of the best promos in the business. Right. He can carry himself, but he's not on that level. Like, this is a point where, like, in the build, I would, especially when they did at the Rumble and everything, like a CM Punk in this position would have been absolutely that would have been got that crossover appeal that and those two going back and forth on the mic. Just imagine, like, Logan Paul saying Logan Paul stuff and and Punk responding back with, "We missed you on the tour of Japan. Where were you?" Just stuff like that, like the little jabs that he would do. I felt would have been better utilized and had more of a WrestleMania feel to it. This just feels like, okay, these guys can have a good match. So let's put them in there to have a good match. Well, but there's no reason for it. It was like Logan Paul just come on the show one day and go, "AJ Styles talked trash about me." I'm like, no, he didn't. That never happened. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, well, there was no paths crossed, nothing. They didn't cross paths on the Rumble. There's absolutely, I mean, maybe the Elimination Chamber, I don't remember, but like, literally, it was nothing. It was just like, okay, well, we don't have anything to do with this guy. It reminds me of Triple H and The Undertaker from WrestleMania 17, when they realized that neither one of them had a match like a week before the show. So they gave him a match.
Well, and here's the thing, too, that when you look at this, and I'm going to get deep in the weeds making this point, but you're one of the guys I can get deep in the weeds with as far as this. Promo-wise, I agree with you about AJ Styles. I think he's very similar to another all-time great worker, Bret Hart, where
I was going to say the same thing.
Wow, okay. So all right, so you're going to see exactly where I'm going. Both of them doing heel promos, you wouldn't worry about them at all. Or if they're right off a turn, right, you have like the heel residue. There's a time like when guys turn face, but they still, it's the best of both worlds. They're a face and the crowd can cheer them, but they've still got, the heel swagger to them. So if AJ Styles had some of the heel residue to him, that he could bring that attitude to a promo, but he's basically been sort of like a lukewarm face over a period of time. And it just, he doesn't have any of the persona like AJ Styles when he was at his peak as a heel in this promotion. He was giving promos that were perfectly cromulent. But I mean, you get to this point now, and it's just he's not really going to give the promos that are going to convince you to really kind of stay with it. And the whole thing too is that like it's supposed to be, well, AJ Styles is representing the sanctity of the squared circle against this Logan Paul guy, but like Logan Paul is still, and this is why, again, if there's anybody who single-handedly is like a poster child of why I prefer AEW, it's a thing of like, I realized that like even after Triple H took over, it was only ever going to be a ceiling of not sports entertainment and more pro wrestling being put in. There's always going to be a ceiling because of the commercialization of it and who they're selling to and whatever. And Logan Paul represents that ceiling. And the story that they're telling is that like AJ Styles is representing the sanctity of wrestling against Logan Paul. Ostensibly, I think they're telling this story, but Logan Paul's the poster child for it. He's got his freaking ads on the ring mat. Okay? This guy is supposed to be the guy with his ads on the ring mat. The guy to Triple H in and out of character is praising as bringing so much to the company in terms of eyeballs. Like, this is not how you do an outsider storyline, Jake Digman. This is not how you do a storyline of the guy defending the sanctity of the squared circle. Not at all. It doesn't match up to the reality of the situation here.
I agree with that. My problem with it is that's every Logan Paul match story.
Yeah.
They're all
right.
Defending the sanctity of the squared circle, LA
right.
Knight when he was going for the United States Championship. It's all about the sanctity. You're an outsider. Rey Mysterio against Logan Paul. You're an outsider. Every single thing since he's become a quote unquote part-time wrestler has been, that's it. That's the whole story. There's nothing beyond that, which it's like, okay, if you're going to do that, then at least do it where it's something interesting. And the problem, this goes back to AJ Styles, it's inconsistency. He was a heel feuding with LA Knight, got hurt, and then came back and for some odd reason, never explained, he's just a babyface now. He's like, you know what? I just realized I was wrong. And they have been doing this whole thing of like in the build of this where like Karrion Kross has been telling AJ Styles he needs to do his evil ways. Now a thing like go back to his evil ways, which was a reference to his TNA character that he had down there. It would be cool. I don't see him doing it, but it'd be really cool if he came out to his Get Ready to Fly TNA theme and was like that AJ Styles, just like, that it never happened. It's the same guy. You just change the music, have the hood up, and make him TNA AJ Styles for light, and do the whole evil ways and like get ready to fly, and then oh, we've never seen this version of AJ Styles in the WWE. It's the same guy, just because it's WrestleMania, so they got to do something that is to fresh and shake things up a little bit. It just, I don't know. I'm just like, the build to this has been so lackluster. Like, again, the match is going to be great. They're going to do moves and they're going to have false finishes and the crowd's going to chant, this is awesome. And it's going to be fun. And it'll probably get 3.5 stars, but it's just like how we got to this is just seems so trite.
Well, the other thing is too, if you go to do something subtle like that, like referencing the TNA background, whatever, don't forget the reason that you can't really pull that off. And that reason is you have the Art Donovan of the 2020s, i.e. Pat McAfee on commentary, and he's just going to sit there and crap on it. I don't get it. Did this guy used to be different or something? He's just going to sit there and do that whole thing and basically ruin it like he ruined so much with his commentary. So, that's with his whole one note dumb jock crap. So just a thought.
That's funny. So Pat McAfee's the only reason why Keita will watch Raw. When he's not on, she can't stand it. She says to me, and he comes across as a real person watching it as opposed to a like they're like rehearsed. Like all the other guys sound like they're doing corporate shill, and he's the only one that sounds like he has a job outside of here, so he just says what he actually thinks. I actually like McAfee because it's a change of pace and it's completely different than the cookie cutter pro wrestling commentators that have always done the same thing over and over and over and over again. And not everything is for everyone. I get that. I'm not going to try to sell you on them.
Yeah.
I just, because it's something different. I'm not saying everything's is, hits it out of the park every single time, but I there's just, it just feels real. And a lot of other times they come across to me as, especially in the WWE, it comes across as like, you can tell they're reading the script, and no one gives McAfee good or bad. No, it doesn't sound like McAfee has a script.
Yeah, well, I mean, first you'd have to learn how to read, right? So there's that impediment, but yeah. So
you're just not a fan of the Colts, are you? Wow.
I don't know. I'm just not a subscriber to the whole shtick. I guess, I don't know. Call me a hater.
I get it. It's fine. It's, the same reason I can't watch AEW is because I think Excalibur is grating and annoying. And he's just like, oh my God, they did this in front of 17 people in PWG in 2012. No one cares. No one saw it. No one cares other than the 12 people who were there going, oh my God, he referenced this one match in 2012 that these two, no one saw it, which I know is irony because I just said a big reference to his TNA character. I know what I just did there before you call me out on it, on the hypocrisy.
Will it shock you to know as a
to it, but I
as somebody that loathes McAfee's commentary, would it shock you to know that I love Excalibur's commentary?
It wouldn't shock me at all. See, it's like two different sides of the coin on that.
Yeah.
I mean, like I tried for the longest time, and he just comes across as like, for me, Excalibur comes across as like, oh, you didn't know this happened? You're an idiot. How dare you not know these two had a 5-star match at New Japan's Reckoning 2019. You didn't realize that? Well, and they got like Meltzer who's just like eating this crap up and just like, yeah, you got to like do your research. No, people who are watching aren't going to do the research and not going. That's why AEW is at the peak of numbers they will be at. They have their audience. They're never going to grow from it just because of that. For the people who like that sort of thing, that's the thing you guys like. Cool, whatever. I'm not knocking it. It just. I like the shows they did without him on there, where they had like Rick Abani and everything. I think it's great because he doesn't come across making you feel like an idiot to me. But it's two different sides. I get your whole point of Mac, if you come across as a dumb jock too. I'm not disagreeing with you. You're absolutely right. It's just whatever you like.
Well, I'm a pro wrestling elitist, so I'm down with Excalibur. Let me mimic putting a mask on here and support.
It's like kind of like Matt Stryker when he first got into WWE, and he had a lot of smart references. And at the time I was like, oh yeah, I love this. But now every time I hear that they show the clip of Booker T coming back at the Rumble, and you hear him going, I'm marking out, bro. I'm marking out. It's just so cringe. It's so cringe. I'm like, oh, just delete that. It's so bad. Like, over in real time, I used to love the guy and think like, oh, speaking of Stryker, that is like he offered different, fresh insight, and then he became in front of our eyes a caricature of himself, which was wild. And then as a result of at the end of it, he couldn't get a gig anywhere. Go figure.
Yeah. And he had you saying as you're watching it, delete your life account. But at the risk of sounding too smart, Markish, the poster child for what we've been talking about as far as randomness on the card would be the next one, the Fatal 4-Way for the Intercontinental Championship. Braun Breaker, the champion, versus Penta versus Finn Balor versus Dominic Mysterio. And the smart money on the street seems to point towards Dominic Mysterio coming away with the Intercontinental Championship in some kind of screw job kind of a finish here. So I could see that being the case. That way you don't directly job Braun Breaker to him, which I know that they're not going to want to do. But, I mean, there's got to be a better way to get from here to there. And then Finn Balor, that's another thing, too. I kind of lump him in with Nakamura as like a guy that they should have done so much more with along the way. And it's too late now. I mean, it's kind of like with AJ Styles. Even if they wanted to rehabilitate AJ Styles, it's too late now. Like, there's a couple of guys that should still be on the main event fringes here. Finn Balor's never even won a world title in the split title era. Oh, the one night. Okay, all right.
Well,
never got. Okay, all right. Well, the one night and never gotten it. You're absolutely right.
That was amazingly. That was it. That was his peak. That was his peak. It's just so sad because NXT Finn Balor was amazing.
Yes, we were laughing at the Brooklyn crowd calling it the fruit roll up. Yes, but he's never gotten
a roll up championship.
He's never been back.
Never even close because he got hurt in that spot. Put in that spot, he got hurt, and they never had faith in him ever again, which is sad.
Right, and
his moment again, his time has passed. He's a guy that I could see getting an AEW run here sooner than when this digs up.
Why would Tony Khan bother?
Because he's marked for guys that wrestled in Japan. And the whole reuniting the Bullet Club guys, having the whole story of those guys all like to work with each other over and over again. It's always the same guys working with the same people on repeat like that.
AEW is too crowded at the top. They're too. You can't put him in there and put him in the main event picture. They're too crowded at the top, anyways. So
we'll see. It just seems like a lot of guys that once they age out of WWE, somehow end up in AEW.
Yeah, very, very.
A lot of guys that's happened to a lot of guys. And Nakamura and Finn Balor are two guys at some point. I'm not saying because he probably has a few years left on his contract.
Mm-hmm.
So he just a guy I could see doing a run. And it'd be good, the Prince is back kind of thing. But I just wasted potential they had with him. They had a chance to make him into a star. WWE, I mean, they had a chance to make him into a star when he first came in, and they never did. And now he is just at the point of where he's going to be. But I do want to touch on something else that I talked to you about last year, and we were doing this. And you're talking about how the whole idea was to make Dragon Lee, I think it was, into the next Hispanic lucha star for WWE. Yes. I'm doubling down on you. It is Dominic Mysterio is the next future Hispanic star for the WWE. I'm doubling. Dom is one of my favorite wrestlers in the world right now to watch on any show. His character, which it's hilarious if you'd have told me Ray's goofy looking kid would have been one of my favorites to watch, but he has become that. He is the way he has matured, but improved in front of our very eyes has been nothing short of amazing to me. And the matches he's did there, and he has become the guy that they go to that, it's going to put on a good match with somebody. He can play that ridiculous, cowardly, snidey heel. And he can also put up he had a match with Gunther not too long ago that the crowd actually got behind Dom and thought for a second Dom was going to win, which just shows, how much of his ability, in my opinion, has improved, in my opinion. And now comes the part where you vehemently disagree with me.
Well, and again, and this is where people are going to accuse me of being tribalistic for mentioning AEW in a superior light so many times during this show. But everything you said about that guy being the sniveling little heel and everything like that, the closest counterpoint I can think of to that in AEW is Kyle Fletcher. And a million times out of a million, I would rather watch Kyle Fletcher matches. Call me a mark for, 7 stars in the Tokyo Dome, bruv. But I mean, AEW's version of it is somebody that I'd much rather watch as far as cocky, sniveling heel who can actually go out there and tear the house down. And Dominic Mysterio is fine as a character and everything like that. But this is a character company. And that's kind of like, if you prefer the characters, if you prefer, you were there last year at what I call Story Slam. You got to see the stories play out, bruv. And the match was not so much, but you had some big turns and a big return in the main event with Roman Reigns. You got to see moments when you were at Cleveland Stadium. You would have gotten to see 4- and 5-star matches if that was
4- and 5-star matches to who? To who? Some little tribalistic people in their sitting in their house? Some guy in California that everyone put his opinion on a pedestal because they can flip out and they don't know when to freaking finish? It's like they don't know when to climax. That's my problem with AEW. They never know when to finish the damn match. They just keep going and going and going.
Too many false finishes.
And then it's just false finishes. And then Kyle Fletcher. I couldn't tell you who that guy was on a lineup. I know he's Will Ospreay's friend and he shaved his head. Big deal.
He goes out there. Bruv. 1/2 of Aussie Open.
Yeah. To compare the two on that. If I were to compare, him to anybody in AEW would be MJF. That being Dominic Mysterio. That's who I would compare to.
I'd still take MJF
I mean,
easily, hands down.
Oh, I would take MJF too. He's the, I can't. MJF is right now the smartest man in wrestling. He's taking a billionaire's money and sitting there waiting until his deal to be up so that he can go once all this stuff is free and get a big money spot. I don't blame him. MJF is not long term at AEW. I can tell you that he will leave at some point. I will bet the farm on that one.
So
and it's going to be sooner than later.
Night 3 of a 4-night thing in a warehouse somewhere, right?
Yes, maybe. At the end of the day, it is WWE for a reason, and plus these guys, Cody's there, he's got his boys there. I very much see him at some point making the jump over to the WWE, because I just, his character's tailor made for that. But we could do a whole other podcast. A conversation on that on those guys.
Well, your boy Dom's going over. Dom's going to get her done.
That'd be cool. As long as Braun doesn't go get him.
Yeah. Well, if I was to say that
Dom's going to pin Finn because that's the only one that bigger.
Okay, yeah, probably, yeah, and that'll further the breakup storyline and tell a story, bruv. So there you go. I find
it interesting. I find it interesting that we're still two different sides of wrestling fans on this one. Okay, you don't like the way you were talking. You don't like stories, and I'm the opposite. I don't like watching a match for the sake of a match.
I love stories, but I don't love a story but I want stories and matches. I feel like I'm getting both with AEW. I want stories and matches, but like in WWE, it's matches uber all, or it's stories uber all. It's a thing of like, it's only there to serve the purpose of a moment of a story being told and everything like that. Versus, I want them to go hand in hand. I truly do. I feel like AEW gets pigeonholed in that way. You want stories, but you want matches that are worthy of the stories. And the thing is this, like, I guess you could say, so you've evolved since the Sunday Night Submission days. I guess I haven't. I'm kind of the same guy I was then. All the criticisms I was making at the time, I'm making now, basically. So, some folks evolve, some folks do not.
When you mentioned Story Slam, I laughed because at that one, I consider that show for everything that happened in the ring and the experience I had personally.
Okay.
It's one of the top 3 live events. And I've been to WrestleMania 20. I was at 4 WrestleManias. That is the most fun I've ever had with my friends at a wrestling show. I had so much fun because something happened. Okay. I know you're looking at me like, I can't believe you'd say that. Something happened in every single match. It progressed something, not just, hey, they had a match and the guy won and moved on. Like, that's my issue. It's like, the quote-unquote 5-star matches don't mean anything because it doesn't, like, you forget about them a week later. Like, I still remember like that moment of Dirty Dom turning healer on Rhea Ripley and the crowd reaction, everybody losing their minds. Like, oh my God, this is great. Like, but I'll take that over random guys having a 5-star match that the next week doesn't mean anything.
But I don't like matches where it's just, I don't like matches where it's just filling time until the thing happens. What's wrong with having a great match that evolves into a thing happening?
That's every match in AEW to me. Literally every match in AEW to me. It's just they're wrestling for the sake of wrestling. He puts all his toys back out, and then this guy's gonna face this guy. The booking reminds me of me when I was 12 with my action figures, and I have them laid out, and then, okay, we did this show, and now we're gonna do it again. Like, there's no I mean, you're gonna tell me there is, and I'll admit I haven't watched in a while because it would just be like it's the same thing, which is I guess WWE does it too. I don't know. I think AEW they just do matches for the sake of matches. And I don't think one story rarely leads into another, in my opinion. And everything always just comes back to the guys in the elite.
Okay. No, listen,
always. Hey. And this whole Moxley thing is just cringeworthy. It's unwatchable.
Not the finest moment. I'll give you that. The whole stuff with the Death Riders has been a miss. I'll give you that.
Yeah,
I'll give you
I
that.
like so many guys in AEW. I just think Tony Khan is burnt out as a booker and should let somebody else take over in a different direction.
Or at least strongly contribute. But yeah,
I just think it's like it's the same. Right.
I'm not defending everything
It's
they
the
do.
exact same thing that was happening in 2020 in 2021 is the exact same thing that's happening in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
Nothing has changed.
I have my
Chris
criticisms of the
Jericho does the
product.
same regurgitated
Right.
crap. It's the
Yeah.
same thing. Right.
I do
And it's
have
just,
my
yeah, I mean,
criticisms.
don't get
You
me wrong.
know,
I remember I messaged you and I said, I could watch Eddie Kingston and Daniel Bryan go at it all. Bryan Danielson go at it all night. I love that
yeah,
match. That was great.
yeah.
You know, that's the kind of wrestling I enjoy that because
Well,
there's a story. It's my problem I have a lot of times that WWE does this is, and you know, it's when they don't sell anything. There's no psychology. It's just video games. Get your moves in,
yeah.
get your moves in, get your moves in, and no one sells anything. You get hit with
Well,
something, you get right back up again. Will Ospreay gets hit with 7 different moves, and I'm like, you should be dead, dude. Sell something.
Here's
And
where
then Dave Meltzer's like 5 stars.
I'm
Okay.
going to be very, very, very unbiased here. And I'm going to say this. There was another match where this happened, but I remember it particularly. So it happened twice. I only remember the one match. The one match where it happened, it was Sammy Guevara and MJF. And I don't remember which one hit it. It was a tombstone pile driver off the second rope for a 2 count. And I'm just like,
right.
You got to be kidding me. So I have some of the same criticisms, Jake. I have some. I mean, I'm not as upset as you are, but I have some of the same criticisms.
I'm not
like it just.
I'm not upset by it. I actually enjoy our back and forth. This is actually really fun. I'm not upset by it. I'm just it's a good point counterpoint to it.
Yeah,
that's the reason why. Other than fans like yourself, no one watches it. The numbers don't lie. More people have stopped watching AEW, and AEW has done nothing to get them to go back up.
It's inching. It's inching up if you pay attention to the numbers here. So it's not dramatic yet. It probably won't be dramatic
I want them
until
to succeed.
Well, it's going to be around for years to come. By the way, you might have heard as of this week, it's been on the air longer than Nitro. Suck on that, Eric Bischoff. So there is that part of it as well. But but looking
low hanging fruit there.
Yeah. All right. So looking at the remainder of the night 2 card here, I said night 1, there's only one legitimate semi-main. Night 2, I'm going to tell you flat out, there's not a legitimate semi-main. There's just the main event. And so having said that, if there was going to be one, it would be this one, based on the star power of the 2 guys involved. But Damian Priest, Drew McIntyre, thrown together. It's something where, again, you could have told more of a full-fledged story over a longer period of time. Damian Priest, the guy who plucked Drew McIntyre's moment last year. Drew McIntyre spent the whole year blaming CM Punk for it, but it could have also been, an element of, by the way, Damian Priest as well, taking that to kind of cash in on me. They've made it a Sin City street fight just to try and juice it up a little bit, but Damian Priest is not a guy who was really elevated that much by being the world champion. You were there at Story Slam last year. He only became a full-fledged face in his final match as champion. He was basically a tweener, pseudo-face, basically in there during that run. And it's interesting because I've seen him for a long time as sort of heir to the kind of Razor Ramon thing, beyond doing the whole, finishing maneuver thing, being a tall guy who can work well and move well and whatever. But it's I don't know. He looks like he's going to be stuck at Razor Ramon's spot on the card, which in his case was never main event. Drew McIntyre, I think, clearly is going over here because he's the one they see more in. He's the one they're going to be doing more with in the near to immediate term. And again, this match, like the old Triple H plunder matches back in the day, it'll be decent, but to pretty good. But I don't know. To me, it is what it is.
Drew McIntyre has been doing the best work. He deserves a better spot at WrestleMania. This is absolutely thrown together. In my opinion, Drew should have been in a much more high-profile match on the card. Again, I just is what it is. I just don't see Damian. They're trying to play Damian Priest is at that level, and I just don't see it. I agree with what you said. He's he is where he's going to be, and he's again he's not getting any younger. I believe he just passed the 40 threshold.
Jake, here's the thing. You look at it, and I think and this is even a guy like me who's a lot of times a critic of their stuff. I look at the card this year and I'm just like, gee whiz, I thought the top of the card was deeper than this. Like you say, Drew McIntyre should be working with somebody, more deserving of being in there with him. No slight on Priest, but he was not, like I said, elevated by being world champion. Like who? Who would you pick out of this? Who's worthy of being in there with Drew McIntyre out of this bunch? It's not as deep as I thought it was, dude. So it's like, they have to make
it's absolutely not. It's like you got to work with what you're given. I thought they were going to do Drew McIntyre and LA Knight. Personally, I thought that's what the build was going to be towards, and like get Drew like that. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I guess, but the next match here, you talked about this before. Io Sky, who is ironically the women's world champion, shoehorned into the match. It should be Bianca and Rhea Ripley. This match, were it for the women's world championship without Io Sky, and I'm an Io Sky fan, and I think, again, she's a very exciting wrestler and everything, but she's out of place in this match. Bianca and Rhea is a match they'd held off on for a long time. You end up getting it here in this form. This is a match that would be a legitimate semi-main for night 2 of WrestleMania, and they blow it. And it's one of those things where this is the cowardly booking of they don't want Bianca or Rhea to go down to the other one here. So Io's in there clearly just to eat the pinfall. From who? I don't know. Maybe Rhea, based on the way that they seem to be setting her up as a bit of a pretender to even be in there. So maybe that in the end, I got the last laugh. I'm the champ. I don't know. And I don't really care. And I wouldn't say that if it was Bianca and Rhea, because that would tear the house down.
I agree with you. I agree with everything you just said right there. I think the only story in this is that Rhea Ripley has never beaten Io Sky. So I guess that's the finale we're going with here. It was something that story is like, I never knew that kind of thing. Okay. That's the build that Rhea Ripley has never pinned Io Sky, which is really funny going back to NXT and everything. Yeah. So, okay, that's what we're doing. But if that's the case, then Bianca feels like the third wheel on added to it. The money match was Bianca and Rhea. They've kept them apart for so long, and the fact that they didn't do it here on a show that we've just said is desperately calling out for some kind of big money matches. And this is a card where if they were still trying to sell this based on the card, this wasn't good on paper. This is one of like the worst cards ever. But that's not to say it's not going to deliver, but it's just it's like randomizer.
Jake, you want me to give some clickbait here? I'll give you some clickbait. The question going into this card is whether WrestleMania 9 will still be the worst WrestleMania from Las Vegas at the end of Sunday night.
That's a pretty good one.
How's that for clickbait,
WrestleMania 9. That's a good one. WrestleMania 9, I like how you added in from Vegas because I don't think WrestleMania 9 is the worst WrestleMania of all time. I think that WrestleMania, what's
11
was Atlanta.
11
was worse, and the one from Atlanta was worse. The one with the
27? Really?
27. That was terrible. That was a terrible show.
It wasn't great, but I don't know if 27 was one of the worst. I don't know. I mean, was it? I don't know. Don't forget 7.
Also terrible. Two. 1 and 2 are terrible. Yeah. 1 gets a pass because it's the first one. Yeah. 2 is awful.
7.
And 3 outside of 2 match. 7? Yeah, 7's pretty bad. Too.
7 was dog crap.
3 is a 2-match show.
7 was dog crap, and it was a thing. 4.
Bad ones. A lot of bad ones in there.
Yeah. 5 and 6 were not deep at the very least. 5 and 6 had main events, but they weren't deep. So we could be critical all night here. But a guy who has been a big part of WrestleMania history, John Cena, going for title number 17, the undisputed WWE Championship against Cody Rhodes. And hey, maybe we'll hear something about The Rock during WrestleMania here, which we haven't since Elimination Chamber. So that whole thing, the way that it went down, the whole turn here, this is one of these things where, again, to go back to the previous match here, like with Io Sky, if we see Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley matched up on an upcoming pay-per-view here, and they don't call them pay-per-views anymore, whatever, you know what I mean, Peacock show, then my theory about holding things back for different points during the year will make sense. They might look at it like, look, we already sold out WrestleMania. Who gives a crap? And we're going to have Rhodes and Cena in the main event. So if they're going by the old school thing of once you sell a house out, once you've made all the money, anything else you do is superfluous, then this match is being counted on to carry a disproportionate part of the card because it's this match, it's the main event Saturday night, and it's to whatever degree you want to believe the Gunther Jey Uso match. And then nothing else really matters, it seems like. There's a disproportionate amount of importance on this match, on this show. They haven't even really touched on, and I used to, even on Sunday Night Submission back in the day when I would make some points here. I mean, I must have been the biggest smart mark of all because I would make points and some of you other guys would be like, oh, geez, Rick, who's even going to care about that? But like, I'll say this, John Cena, you know, you look at the part-time era that's been so unsuccessful for him, that's been part of the storytelling. Where did that really kind of begin? When he came back in Las Vegas, SummerSlam in 2021, and laid down that challenge to Roman Reigns. And ultimately in the match subsequently ended up being unsuccessful in that. So this is sort of not exactly the beginning of where that story started to get told, but again, it is, I give them credit. It is a thing where it's a very daring thing to do in wrestling history that somebody's going out on the sentimental tour as somebody just turned hated heel. But what's hilarious is that all the things they never acknowledged in real time, they're acknowledging now. You know, like, oh, the crowd crapped on him. The crowd crapped on the spinner belt, whatever. I still remember the Sunday Night Submission WrestleMania 22 post show where I said they were zooming in. There were out of 13,000 people in that crowd, there were about 100 people that were happy that John Cena beat Triple H. And by gum, they zoomed in on every last one of them. They could have done a wide shot when Hulk Hogan was the champion, right? They could have done a wide shot with any of these other champions and found people happy. They had to do creative camera work. But now it's, oh, you all hated me at the time. So it's like all the things they would never admit at the time, they're admitting to now. I find that part of it hilarious.
That is pretty hilarious, but it's also nice that, like, you know, they actually did it and didn't leave that out on the table. They could have very easily just done like the farewell tour and, like, you know, the goodwill ambassador tour and never gone there. That they left all of this dangling and never addressed. The fact that they are addressing it, I'm happy with that. That, you know, they're making a reference to going back to saying, like, you know, he was hated and all this stuff, and that, you know, the, dare I say, whitewashing it and acting like, oh, that's because for the longest time they were just going to go with, it seemed like that's what they were going to do. But it's like this run where everyone's loving Cena, and I'm like, they didn't always love him. And
right.
I think this is a story that is still playing out. I think there's a story to be told that John Cena does win. I think we're going to get shenanigans out the wazoo here. However it is, I think it's the end of it, John Cena is going to win. He is going to get number 17. And then you're going to get the Cody Rhodes. He's going to cut one of them crying promos that he likes to do, that he let everybody down. And this whole arc's going to end with Cena putting Cody Rhodes over and then cementing him and shaking his hand that he is the next guy. That is, and then John rides off into the sunset as a babyface. A lot of people think like his last match will be for the championship. I could very much see his last match being a tag match with Cody Rhodes at the end of the day.
Maybe.
Something to that effect.
But
yeah, where
by
he's
the
like,
way,
you know, gives the rub to somebody, gives him the rub.
The circuitous whole thing of when, you know, WWE and the rub, if he gives Cody the rub at the end of the year here, about 20 months or so after Cody ended the longest, most interminable world championship run of the modern era with Roman Reigns, that would be similar to 2013 at WrestleMania when The Rock crowned John Cena as the next big guy, holds his hand in the air. I'm passing the torch to John Cena in 2013. The WWE is very funny when it comes to the timing, aren't they?
Yeah, no, yeah, you're absolutely correct on that, and it's just like he's already the guy. Like, you know, there's the smart marks. I know they'll be like, oh, I want like Jacob Fatu to murder.
Yeah.
I just picked a random name to take Cena out in his last match, make him a star, but we know that's not how they do things. things.
Yeah.
Just like that's how I would do it, but that's not how they do things. So it's going to be something to like. There's going to be an arc at this where John realizes the error of his ways, and then I mean, he could just lose too, but I don't see them investing all this into the
There's
heel
no
turn
money in that.
to just
Yeah.
have him lose. There's no money in that. They want Cena out on the red carpet with that belt. They want Hollywood Cena basically to take that belt around with them. And my whole argument with this though is they could have done all of this without The Rock. They didn't need that whole, they didn't need that whole The Rock turning heel or whatever. They absolutely could have just, or wanting Cody's soul. They could have just done the ending to Elimination Chamber. Cody could have come out there, shook Cena's hand, pointed at WrestleMania, being like, oh my God, I'm excited to face you. Cena be like, yeah, really excited, and then just kicked him in the nuts. And just ended on like, and the Rock part was completely unnecessary. And and Travis Scott, I could care less about. Only thing I know about him is people got killed at his concert.
Well, so I've never liked him because of that, and then he took liberties with Cody when he was in the ring. I will say, with The Rock being there, that was a thing
you put those two on the same page. People died at his concert, and he took liberties with Cody Rhodes in the ring. That's great.
That's the sign of being a wrestling fan, right? That's how seriously I take the squared circle.
I love it.
I'm like Gunther. The squared circle is sacred. But I will say, as far as The Rock being there, because they've gone out of their way as a company to try to compare this to the Hogan turn in '96 to the NWO. And there is something about The Rock being there for Cena's turn that, like, in this instance, The Rock sort of serves the purpose of Hall and Nash, sort of like, if you're joining somebody else in villainy, it kind of makes it bigger. There's a certain argument to be had. I'm actually relatively sympathetic to that argument, but I do think The Rock inserted himself into this thing here. And I do think that, again, the fact that part of it has been dropped since then, I promise you it won't be dropped at WrestleMania, because they're smart enough to know it cannot be dropped at WrestleMania. The Rock has to figure into this. And for as much as Drew McIntyre, mostly on social media, has been hinting towards, himself potentially joining up with The Rock, maybe in that big schmaz at the end, maybe Drew McIntyre is one of the ones that is, is able to land the fatal blow on Cody or whatever the case may be. That then sets it up. It's interesting that when they were on TV, Cody and McIntyre, relatively recently here, they acknowledged ties between them in the past. I don't think that they acknowledged that they were actually, I think, two-time tag team champions and unified tag team champions at that, back in the early 2010s. That you cannot do a feud with it between those two guys if that doesn't come into play. If that, because, and McIntyre being like, hey, I was the bigger star at the time, but you leapfrogged me. That's not fair, blah, blah, blah. But, this is going to be a very good match. It'll be super schmazzy like it was last year. This is going to be sort of the reverse mirror image of what we saw last year, the whole Avengers Endgame thing in Philadelphia, except this time it's going to be the bad guy that comes out on top. It's going to be Cena.
So it's going to be Infinity War.
I'm not familiar enough with the reference, but sure. Okay.
Infinity War is the Avengers where the bad guy won, where Thanos won and beat all the Avengers.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, so that,
or it could be Doomsday, just a freaking mess that has been rewritten several times over again because the person who they were going to push got arrested and they had to redo the entire story, and now none of it makes sense, and the fans are kind of giving up on it. There's some comparisons there too.
That sounds a lot more like the Fed, to be honest with you. So I can see that being the case, but I mean, it's going to be. It's going to be what it is. I don't know how much of a premium I'm going to place on catching all of this live this weekend, but I have Peacock, so I will end up catching it more or less, at least not long after it happens. And we'll see. And I hope to be pleasantly surprised. I hope there is the chance for that for me anyways, because my expectations are rock bottom for the other, matches on the card outside of the three that I mentioned, the two legitimate main events and the legitimate semi-main event from Saturday night, the World Championship match. So we'll see how it plays out. Any other thoughts you have that we didn't get to yet, Jake?
No, it's always a pleasure to do this, and really happy to sit down and talk to you in light of events of the past week or so for both of us. So It's pretty cool to sit there and talk to a friend and be able to, even if we, vehemently disagree on certain things. That's the beauty of the fact that we can
Yeah.
disagree and agree to disagree on stuff, and it makes it fun. And you're one of my favorite people to have a witty banter with back and
Yes.
forth on this. It is WrestleMania. I will watch it live as I always have. Just a tradition that is there that I do. Even the bad ones, it's the part of the culture of my life. It's funny when I told my family I wasn't coming to Easter, and my aunt showed up said, what time's your show? I'm like, oh, there's events all day. And I saw her on Monday. She goes, you're really not coming for Easter? I looked at her dead to rights and I said, it's not my fault they put Easter on WrestleMania Sunday.
Well, right back at you on all of that. And again, you are, if I was to describe somebody in a way of like, I don't know if I've ever heard anybody described like this, but you're like my weird thoughts twin. So many times I'll have a weird thought about something and be like, there's one person in the world that's going to pop for this, and it's going to be Jake Digman. And there's a lot of times.
And I appreciate it every time.
Yes. And I send it to you and you laugh like I know you're going to. And I just, in light of the events, which actually we covered a bit last week, myself and Ben Chu on the show here, as we were announcing about next week's live NFL draft coverage, which we're going to be doing that night, which is going to be dedicated to the memory of great FDH Lounge dignitaries Ken Detweiler and Anthony Petrone. And again, you and I last week having the sad responsibility of being at Anthony's wake. And again, I want to thank you here, as I have previously, of like you helping to make that a lot easier for me. Just absolutely, gutting for me personally, and certainly I know for you and the other friends and family and whatever. Anthony at just 45 years old, far too soon. And again, Anthony and Ken. So sad to see both of them go, and we will be spending some time on NFL Draft Night talking about that as we are dedicating the live show in their memory. So it's just always, it's great. Out of the folks from the old gang, the old Sports Talk Network alums, it's great to have the friendships that still endure. It's painful when two guys like that leave the scene prematurely, but so rewarding to still have friends like you in this world, Jake.
I appreciate the kind words, Rick. And, as we get older, you learn to appreciate, I appreciate more the friendships that I've had, that we've been able to cultivate over the years, and I don't take any of them for granted. I say to people a lot of times that I have had a fortune to have a very cliche, a blessed life, that I've done a lot of very, very cool things. And you, my friend, have been a part of a lot of those things that were in there. And, we'll keep the memory of our friend will be with us always. And it's funny, I didn't tell you this that night, obviously for reasons, but when we were, I believe Anthony would have appreciated this, so I see our friends Tony and Leah, right? And I walk over there and I see Leah, and I haven't seen them since their wedding, I'm pretty sure. Okay. And I see her, I'm like, and Leah sees me, and she gives a hug, we start talking, and it's like, I'm really happy to see you, but our friend is lying in a casket. But I'm really happy to see you. But our friend isn't like, and it was just this really weird dichotomy of like emotions where I'm like, I want to be happy to see you, but then I turn to the right and there's our friend. And I'm like, I could just see Anthony and his sense of humor of knowing him being like, seeing there's some sense of like humorous irony in there where it's just like, oh man, like I want to be happy to see my friend, but I don't want to be happy to see you I don't want to see you under these circumstances.
No, I get it.
Where we're at, but it's just like, but I'm also just happy to see you.
That's how I felt. Yeah, that's how I felt. I was happy to see you guys. You guys and Joe Lindway and Tony and Leah and Tony's father, and just was great to see them. And it's always great to see Matt Petrone, but certainly not under those circumstances. But it's a thing where, having been at some of your wrestling watch parties, having met a lot of your friends, and I still go back to when they used to do the cruiserweight wrestling in the WWE. I still remember trolling your one big guy friend who was a weekend wrestler who hated the cruiserweight stuff. I remember trolling it about how great the cruiserweight wrestling is and everything. That guy would get so mad at me, but it was like, you are cut, seeing you with those friends, me with the friends that I have, we're cut from the same cloth. me and you, brother, we are trillionaires in the ways that count most in life, man. As far as the people around us, we are trillionaires, brother, and it's a great thing.
I would agree with you on that. And, anytime, it's always an honor and a privilege for me to sit down here in the lounge with you. And, any
Love it,
chance
brother.
you want to, any chance we can do it again. Now we're on video. It's,
Yeah.
The irony is we started on video, then we went to audio, and now we're back to video. How about
we're back
that?
to video, and it's a thing where, and I can't tell you, doing the live show next week for the NFL draft and not needing the infrastructure of Sports Talk Network to do it, I can't tell you what that means right there, brother. Not to have to lean on anybody from back at the station to have to be able to pull something like this off feels like $1 million. So,
we were so far ahead of their time, they just didn't realize what they had.
Linway said that to me last week, the great Joe Linway. Yes. Yeah, he said that. And
we had podcasts before podcasts were cool.
Yeah.
Like, we were really trendsetters, and they being Paul, had no idea what he had there and no way how to utilize it properly, which is what it is.
Capitalization, business sense, whatever, all the things that weren't there at the time. Subsequently, we try to build these other things here, and I've been so happy and so honored that if there's one thing over the years that has sort of been a clearinghouse for Lounge alumni, it's been this show. And that's one of the greatest honors in doing it, is to continue to basically hold that group together and bring in folks like you. And yes, Ken and Anthony, who are dearly departed here at this point in time, and so many of the other great ones from back in the day. But Jake, it is always a pleasure to have you on. I look forward to the next time that we get a chance to do so. I won't hold my breath, and it will be for the lead up to All In, because you probably won't be watching any of the stuff for that. But we will find another occasion, maybe SummerSlam season, or maybe some time before then, God willing. But always a pleasure, Jake, and I can't thank you enough for making time here on the show. I really appreciate it, as always, brother.
Thank you, sir.
Really appreciate it, Jake. Thanks, buddy. And thank you, everybody, for checking out FDH Lounge Mini Episode 1824.